Ah,
There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle, along with
two of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yay! So, thank you for joining us. We have a cool two-parter this evening. We do have to do our obnoxious YouTube spiel, as always. So, like, comment, subscribe, right? So, all of that helps us out. We've been getting some really cool people joining us, and we love to see fresh faces alongside our familiar friends. That means a lot to us. It keeps things alive, it keeps things vibrant. Mush talk and I can only talk to each other so much, right? So, you all being here helps enrich the entire experience for all of us. And especially with your comments, engaging with us that way is excellent. Email us, check in for one-on-ones if that's something that interests you. We do offer those, and it's typically a good time. Um, Share our content if that's something that feels meaningful to you. Hopefully,
Yeah.
someone you share with might find it meaningful as well.
Yeah, if you really like what we say, share it with your friends. If you hate what we say, share it with your enemies.
Maybe they'll learn something and suck less. Who knows? All right. Anything else I need to add, Mushtak?
No, we've said too much already.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to the topic at hand. Like I said, we are doing part one of a two-parter, and we are again revisiting the idea of the perfected, completed human being, Insan Al-Kamil. And we are going to be tying this together with the Enneagram, as well as interesting esoteric things that we will delve deeper into next week. But tonight we're going to be laying the no less fascinating foundation for that half of the conversation.
Yeah,
So,
we will probably touch on the idea of higher dimensions this week, but next week we'll delve into them like nobody's business.
spooky.
Very spooky.
We even have diagrams this evening.
Yes.
I love a diagram. All right, let's begin.
Shall we begin? Okay, after you.
So, what inspired this topic for you this week?
Um, Random synaptic connections.
Excellent.
It was actually uh, I was watching one of my favorites, physics channels on YouTube. I'm a little bit of a math geek, so I spend a lot of time watching math videos, which is for most people almost as exciting as watching paint dry. But for me, I love them. And it got me thinking about the idea of what a completed person is and what that allows them to experience, because you don't get to be experiencing what Gurdjieff called the higher dimensions when you are in your completely mechanical state. You just can't get there from here. So we're going to look at that and see what we can come up with.
Ian shares your appreciation for math videos.
Yeah, it's nice to know I'm not the only geek on this broadcast. So, Al-Insan Al-Kamil is the term that we use. It literally means, insan means person.
This
And
is in Arabic, by the
yeah,
way.
this is in Arabic. And it's person in the neutral, oh, very cool. Person in the inclusive sense, in neutral gender, or as neutral gender as you can get in Arabic, as opposed to saying man, which is a completely different word. So insan, people, humans. And Kamil literally means complete, finished. All of the pieces are together, as opposed to the perfect human, which gets slapped on it from a moralistic point of view, which we don't care about. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is the complete person? And the answer is the person, as Gurdjieff said, the person without quotes. I like to think of it as the deconditioned person. And so we strive to decondition the ego. We strive to awaken the machine from its slumber. So here's the thing. You, as essence, are neither awake nor asleep. You just are. And we as people tend to be identified with the machine. When I say machine, I mean the complex of stimulus response, unconscious habits that we have accumulated through our lifetime. And the machine is asleep. So we identify with the sleep of the machine. The process of waking up is not the process of, oh, the essence becomes awake, because that which is your own being, consciousness, essence, is not asleep. It's identified with the sleep of the machine. So the process of becoming a complete human is waking up your mechanical self from its somnambulistic nightmares and allowing it to be present in the waking state rather than going crazy in the sleeping state. Does that sort of make sense? In Arabic, you call the machine the nafs al-amara. Al-nafs al-amara. It means the commanding self. And so, does everybody here have a bad habit or used to have a bad habit? Probably most of you don't have any bad habits anymore. But you remember when you had a bad habit and you would just find yourself doing it? You wouldn't even think about it?
He says, I've got plenty. And
Feel
I'm
free to
seeing lots
share
of
them with the
folks
rest
laugh.
of the class, just in case anybody ran out. So here you are, and you just go, holy shit, I'm doing this bad habit. And you don't even know how you got there. That is the sleep of the machine. This happens to almost all of us, almost all the time. Right now, somebody listening to this video could be caught up in the sleep of their machine. And yet, if I say, hey, are you awake? For that moment, you are going to step away from the sleep of the machine and be present, which is a little bit weird. Following me so far? Makes sense? Anybody want to argue about it? Damn it.
I think everyone's good so far.
Okay. The process of waking up from that sleep is the process of completion. And I think, as I said in the write-up for this particular talk, the completed human is not the end, it's the beginning. It's where you can begin to do the real work. It's where the remedial stops and the generative begins, in a very real sense. So what does that look like? As it happens, there's an Enneagram for that. And I am going to hit the shared screen. Uh-oh. Before I do that, I got to sort this out. There. Hopefully that's going to work. We'll find out. Let me know when y'all can see this.
Yeah, we can see the Enneagram itself.
Okay, here we have an Enneagram. Now we're going to fill this Enneagram in, and we're going to do it by looking at it the way we taught you to look at it a few weeks back. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in the numbers. You notice up here we have both 0 and 9, because the beginning is the end. And around here,
Round clockwise.
round clockwise, is the line of time. The triangle represents the 3 forces found in every process. And this here is the line of instruction, or there's various other names for it.
The moving lines.
Moving lines, all of that. So first, we're going to look at the triangle. In the triangle, we have function, being, and will. The function in any Enneagram, as we said when we were delving into this, is cyclical. It reoccurs over and over and over. Being is that which is transformed. Because what we're looking for in every process is an irrevocable transformation. And the will point is the purpose of the whole exercise. So we begin to fill this in. Up here in the function.
Yeah, you have the Persian for
Yeah.
perfected or completed.
Yeah, I didn't want to write out the whole Arabic.
Yeah.
Put in all the al's. This is the Persian instead of the Arabic. Also the Turkish. We got our Turkish friends covered here. And then what is being transformed? The machine is being transformed. The ego is being transformed. And the process by which we transform it is a process of interruption. And we'll get to that in a bit. And the will, the purpose point, is experiencing the world through essence rather than through conditioning. Right? Make sense?
Any questions so far?
Yeah, because I'll just run through this real quick unless you guys have some questions. Don't everybody talk at once, though. Neil?
I have a question. I've never heard of the full title of Al-Nafs Al-Amara. I've only heard of Nafs. Do you know what the rest of that means?
Yeah.
Yes.
Al-Nafs Al-Amara is the first stage of Nafs. And
yeah, I put in the chat that it's called the commanding self, the inciting self, which, you know, traditionally they might say, oh, it incites you to evil, to bad behavior, to doing self-harmful and harmful to others type things.
It can also incite you to doing good things.
Yeah, it's impulsive.
Yeah, it's basically what we talk about when we say the machine, the mechanical nature.
Right.
There are 6 other stages.
Right.
It's the lowest. The next stage, for instance, is the blaming self. And that's where it's not really blaming. It's more like you observe yourself and you see how mechanical you are in a lot of behaviors. And it goes all the way up until the purified self at the end, which is the seventh. It's done in an octave. And we've done a couple of talks on that. So
yeah, we'll just have to link to those
yeah.
at the end of the video.
Yep. Or ping me on Facebook and I will send you a link to one of our talks that covers the nafs, the 7 stages of ego and all that sort of thing.
Great. Glad that was helpful.
And Ian has a hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing Will on the left and being on the right, I remember that from probably the talk you gave several weeks ago on the anatomy of the Enneagram. But I've been watching a lot of your Enneagram related videos, and at least some of them, I'm sure I saw Will on the right.
Yes, you did. But that's a different thing.
Okay.
When we talk about will on the right, we talk about will and grace.
Mm-hmm.
The first impulse point, the first shock point, you can get through using your will. The second shock point requires a little bit of grace to get through, and that's where the will and grace come in. And that's just me being confusing. I love to be confusing. Keep everybody on their toes.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry, I've got a coughing fit.
Oh no.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's a worthwhile question. So
yeah, it's a very worthwhile question, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was thinking about that earlier today, that I'm going to confuse somebody.
Yeah. So is it really about context then? Like,
yeah, it's about context and understanding the difference between how you talk about what happens there and how you talk about what is needed to get through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amina, so good to see you, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
We have several of our
I've been with you in spirit, but couldn't be physically present, but I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you have something you wanted to share?
Oh, I was just going to add to the Nefs al-Ammara.
Mm-hmm.
It often helps me to think of it as the most primitive self, like almost like the id in the Freudian sense, like it's primitive. It's like a newborn baby. If we look at it in the human development scale, it's like the newborn baby up to about 2-year-old, because it can 2-year-old tantrums. So the nefs ammara is the primitive side of the nefs that hasn't yet started to develop and know itself at all.
Yeah, we also call it lizard brain for the same reason.
Lizard brain, the reptilian part of us. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Thank you, Amina. Yeah, Naomi, did you have another follow-up question or thought?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding it correctly, the nefs as a whole is the ego, but the nefs al-amara is the lowest state of the ego.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Nafs literally comes from, it means breath. So it's like spirit in that sense. Arabic has 2 words for breath. One is nafs and the other is ruh. And both of them can mean breath and both of them can mean spirit. And it gets interesting to look at that, but it will also get us off on a tangent, so I don't want to go too far down there. But yeah, the nafs is that which you have that allows you to exist in this world. You can't not have nafs, because as Amina was saying, it's the part of you that keeps your heart beating. It's the part of you that keeps you breathing, even if you don't think about breathing. You ever think about not thinking about breathing? Most of us breathe without a thought. And that's nafs. And that's literally, it's nafs al-amara. It's the commanding self that keeps the body breathing without our attention.
Yep. And this is why when we talk about, in a lot of Sufi contexts, they talk about destroying or killing the nafs. And our preference is to talk about shaping, training, bringing the nafs into a state of cooperation so that we are not tripped up by it.
Yes,
Can we say that ruh is the matured and the developed part of the self, and nafs is the childlike part? So as it develops, it's the same one and the same thing. So as an adult, you don't want to lose your childhood or childlike innocent side of you, but you don't want to be childish. Whereas the nafs, in its lower stages, it's called nafs, but in its higher stages, it's called ruh. It's the same thing, or two sides of the same coin.
you could look at it that way. I also look at it as nafs is of the body.
Yes, it relates to the physical sense and
Yes.
to our sense of separateness.
Yes.
Whereas the ruh is that complete.
Yeah, the ruh is the ruh is the gift from God.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ruh is the breath that the divine breathed into us to give us life.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the distinction that I make, and God hasn't told me I'm wrong yet. I'm still waiting to find out that I have to rethink everything, but until then, that's kind of what I'm sticking with.
So we work with the nafs because the ruh is already in its divine state.
Yeah, we will also work with the ruh, but in a completely different way. When we work with the ruh, we listen.
Yes, yes.
So now we're going to look at the next part. Voila.
All right, now we've filled in all of these other points on the Enneagram.
Yes. And here we have, in the line of time, we now have all of the steps to move from 0 to 9. And it works like this. First, you find the exterior work. This is, speaking from the Sufi context, this is you go to a Sufi meeting. You sit down. Everybody does zikr. It's cool. You have a good time. You learn to do your prayers. You learn to do your practices and all of that. This is literally gathering the tools that you're going to need. At point 2, you are given your initial practice. For us, the initial practice is the breath. You know, as one of the great teachers within our system said, our method is founded in breath. And so our first practice is a breath practice. We do the breath practice, and then we get to point 3. Point 3 is the practice associated this within our tradition is the stop exercise, the wuquf, the learning to do the pause. And it's literally interrupting the ego. That's why we have that there. And we do that to create the moment between action and reaction.
Oh, okay.
Who's that?
Sachin.
Ah, okay. Now, at point 4, and this is done from a Sufi point of view. So we call point 4 the preparation for initiation. And this, like every other point 4, is a fun place. There's work here. But I think back When I was a young dervish, I feel like I should sing that. When I was a young dervish, you know, I would come to the Sufi house, and I would sit with my friends, and we would talk, and all the other dervishes would hang out, and we'd drink a lot of tea, and we would learn what was expected to receive bayat, to take the hand of the teacher, to put oneself in the way of learning. It's like if learning were a train, preparing for initiation is checking out the track to see where you stand so the train can run you over.
What an image.
Yeah, well.
Spiritual train wreck. On purpose.
Yeah. It's better than my first explanation of it that was given to me. One of my elder brothers said, the Sufi path is like this. You have a mountain and you start climbing the mountain. And the sheikh is there, and the sheikh is going up the mountain just in front of you, and he's cheering you on. And you're watching how he does his hand holds. And so you try and put your hands where he put his hands. And you get all the way up to the top of the mountain, and you stand there and you look at the sheikh all proud of yourself. And the sheikh looks at you, and then he grabs you and he throws you off the other side of the mountain.
Yeah.
And that's when you learn.
Yeehaw.
Yeah. See, I like mine better. So I did not mark the equator on this, but between 4 and 5 is the act of initiating the process. Initiation means to start something. So you initiate the process, and you go from the fun party time of preparing to the hard damn work that is found in the area of the work of the dervish. This is where this is the greater jihad that everybody talks about.
Greater struggle.
Yes, the struggle of the self against the self is literally what it's called. And you work here until you can take that next step, which is the direct experience of your own essence as oneness. Hard to describe, but that's kind of what it is. And that allows you to move into the deconditioned state. And the last step of this is called solitude in the crowd. Khalwat Daranjuman. This is the fourth precept of the masters. Solitude in the crowd is to be inwardly with your work, inwardly with God, while outwardly living fully in the world. So that's the circle and time of this. And now we look at the lines of instruction. As I said before, here in the center of the circle is the bee, and that is a bee. It is not a wasp. It's not a hornet. It is an Egyptian bee. They just look cooler than everybody else.
Wow. All right.
Is that somebody else or somebody coming back?
Somebody else. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So the bee represents the teacher, the instructor, the guide. And the guide uses these moving lines to see what the person needs.
Can I turn it off?
No, it'll stop.
So here we have all of these. The guide, like everything else, starts at 0. Looks at point 1. What is the exterior work that any given person needs? And the way they figure this out is they look at these two lines here. They look down to 4 and they look back to 7.
Preparing for initiation and
The deconditioned self.
yeah,
The
whatever
deconditioned
that
self
is.
the natural state is what you're aiming for.
Mhm.
Preparing for initiation is the big step in that. So you have to think, if you're the teacher, you have to think, how do I prepare this person for initiation? And what is the purpose of this initiation? And then we move up to 2. We go, the purpose of the initiation, we need the breath practice. The breath practice is what allows you to achieve a certain equilibrium. When the teacher is looking at 2, the teacher is always looking ahead. The teacher has the ability to future pace. That's one of the necessities of a real teacher, is the ability to be able to, I don't want to say see into the future, because we aren't talking about anything weird or mystical. It's more the understanding of the outcome that you want and the steps required to get there, and the patience to actually take those steps, as opposed to demanding instant gratification. The ability to create a pause between the desire and the acquisition. So, at the work of the dervish, the teacher is going to look to the deconditioned self and solitude of the crowd. The teacher needs to make sure that the student is preparing themselves to experience themselves without the ego overlay, and to be able to work with that while still having a life. Because we say that it's important to still have a life.
Mhm.
Dropping everything, giving up everything, and going and living in a commune or at a khandaga or at an ashram is not our way. So we're in the world. And in order to be in the world successfully, we do the hard work at 5. And then we get to those places, that we get the student to those places. And at 7, you notice that the 7 line returns to 1. This is important. This is the end of the actual process. 8 and 9 are outside of the process of creating this situation. Now, I return to the hero's journey, because the 7 to 1 line is the student becomes the teacher. Everyone who goes through this process takes upon themselves at step 5 through 6 the being obligation of helping those who are struggling with this. And so the student becomes the teacher. And that doesn't mean you're going to hang out a shingle and say, I am Sheikh Fred, and come to me and I will do this. The teaching happens within your own being. The teaching can happen because you treat somebody a particular way.
So you're walking the talk, you're living the example.
Yes.
And that's essential. It need not be anything more than that, but that is key. To live what you've learned. And others benefit through you living what you've learned.
So does this make sense so far? Do you understand the personal steps that one takes to move towards the complete self, completed self?
Yeah, any thoughts or questions
I'm going to
so
get
far?
rid of this diagram so I can actually stare at y'all.
Stare.
Stare. What do you think?
Naomi.
Yeah, I think you may have mentioned it briefly, but it reminds me a lot of some steps on the hero's journey, like the
Yeah.
exterior work being like the call to action and
Oh yeah, the hero's journey maps so well onto the Enneagram, it isn't even funny.
Yep,
And
so
as
that's
a
a
matter
great
of fact, we
observation.
have done an Enneagram of the hero's journey just because that works so well.
Yeah. Yep, it takes the most, crucial points of it and then plots them on the Enneagram.
Yeah. And if you look at our YouTube channel and you look into the playlists, you will find an Enneagram playlist. And in that you will find the hero's journey and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Alka. Oh,
I have a question.
Yeah, Alka, I just want to say anyone who's new to the Enneagram but is familiar with the hero's journey is probably going to find that it helps make sense of the Enneagram watching that video.
Yeah.
All right, Alka.
Is it possible that these steps, most of them are happening at the same time? Like, so for example, I go to sleep. I see myself going to sleep, and it becomes very painful then to come back and be awake. It's a very painful process for me personally. It's a very painful process. Is that like, is it possible, or is it smooth and I am the one who's lost? It's
It
between
could be
that
neither of
awakeness and sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, everything's happening all at once anyway. In regular reality, it's sequential, more or less. Though there are always processes within processes. But I recommend that people look at the sequential process and ask themselves, where am I in this sequential process? What am I doing?
Yeah. Mm. This breath process for me is causing this, like when I observe myself, for an outside person, it appears I'm relaxed, but I am just really boiling inside.
Then you
So,
are at the place of hardest work. That's where the rubber meets the road, though, when you experience that boiling inside, which has always been there, whether you've been awake to it or not. At least now you're awake to it and can begin to deal with it.
so remind me, I'm sorry. So I'm at what step because I'm boiling inside?
That would probably, I would suspect that you're being around 5.
Okay, thank you.
The no fun point.
Yeah, the no fun point, the hard work point, the point that we all hate. The dark night.
I'm actually thinking of going to a doctor, and they cannot find anything, and I'm like, oh, I am just burning. And I know it's nothing. It's not coming from physical place, but the
It's always
stress
good to check
levels.
that out because you never know when you just may have indigestion. But
No, it's not.
ruling that out, it is probably your own inner work demanding that you pay attention to it.
Yes.
I'm telling you
Yes.
that you can't live like that anymore.
Yes. And it's,
who wouldn't want to live boiling all the time?
yeah, and it's bizarre. It's like I want to be away from people and just go internally. That's the calling. And I am going to the doctors to make sure it's not physical,
Yeah,
anything physical.
which is wise to do.
Yeah. So, but I'm so glad about this class today because it helped me to articulate the question correctly. So thank you.
You are welcome. I'm glad. Thanks, Alka. Naomi, did you have something you wanted to ask or add?
You got to turn your mic on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't seen like much of what your guys's takes are on the Enneagram, but I suspect that this is kind of a cyclical process constantly happening. And there are like kind of like mini versions of that in our daily lives that kind of
ideally going up an upward spiral.
I have sometimes used the term, the adjective fractal. Like it's kind of like, it's just expansive, tiny, everything is kind of connected to everything else. And yes, as Mushtaq said, it's like one leads into another. The results of one's, swing around the Enneagram have to move to the next cycle. Yeah. Yes. So thank you for mentioning that, because it is an important thing to think about in this. Amina.
Can I ask, what's the relationship between 5, 7, and 6? In that 5 is where the work is being done, and obviously sometimes it's a constant work, and 7 is where the deconstructedness is now more apparent. How does 6 intervene here? How does 6 work? What's the relationship there?
Point 6 is it is a point where, remember, something has to come in, a process has to come in from the outside to help push it through. And this is where I say you need a bit of grace to get through here. Without the baraka, it doesn't happen.
Baraka meaning?
Meaning the energy, the blessing.
Blessing.
Yeah.
So as we're doing the work and we're accumulating or accumulating the energy and the baraka, and that's when it comes to its peak maybe, or enough level to intervene and take you out into the next.
And as an extra added fun thing, God reaches out and goes
flick.
And that's the thing that gets you across. That last little impetus, that last little impulse, that little flick from the divine that
like a
helps
kiss
you
from
across
within.
that void.
Like a kiss from within, but it's not that ecstasy, airy-fairy state, but literally like a little, push through. I understand that.
And in some ways, people mistake it for ecstasy, because in 5, it's like you have a horse standing on your foot the whole time you're going through 5. And then God shoos the horse off and you go, oh my God, that feels good.
Relief. Relief from the struggle. For the moment, at least. So you used the word grace, and we did mention how, in this iteration of the Enneagram, we are using the word will here.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit to that so people can follow?
Yeah, this is will in the sense of purpose. So when you look at that, the purpose of what we're doing and what we will to do, what the will of the process is experiencing essence. And that's the will it is talking about, not the intentional will of getting yourself through something.
Applying yourself.
Yeah. So it's it is an imperfect choice of words, but in English, I don't know how else to say it yet. I may be able to figure out a better way at some point.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes part of our process means that we come to the word through teaching it and figuring it out. Because
Or from one of you giving
yeah,
a suggestion that's better than anything we've come up with.
definitely.
That's happened more than once.
Yes. So this is alive as opposed to something that's just out of a book.
Yes.
Yeah. Emina.
Sorry, I'm going to use the words. Can we say then in the 5 stage, it's the juzi irade, the will, the personal will,
Mm-hmm.
and only when it's touched by the kulli irade, the collective or divine will, when they meet is when that grace
That's
takes.
exactly correct.
I like
You
that.
can say it in Turkish. You can say it in Arabic. English doesn't have these concepts so well.
We're going to figure it all out in the best language for the
Yes.
next time.
God
Whether
flowing.
we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if I was a hard case like some of my teachers, I'd be saying, y'all have to learn Arabic, Turkish, and Persian, or I don't even want to talk to you. Fortunately, I ain't that guy. I'm still learning English, so.
Sometimes I am his teacher in that regard,
Yeah.
time to time.
Frequently, at least once a week.
All right, where were we?
We are at,
Oh, yes, we have to talk about 7 onward.
yeah. So we've talked about 8, the idea of solitude in the crowd. What happens there is this is where you begin to learn to perceive the higher dimensions. Why would we want to perceive the higher dimensions besides the fact that it could be cool and better than going to the movies? Because we can learn things and we can acquire a certain amount of energy through not even interacting, but through the process of observing the glimpses that we can get of the higher dimensions, we acquire a certain grace. And that grace can begin to transform us. We can work in more interesting ways. And we need to reach this stage of completion, even if the stage isn't permanent, right? It won't be set in stone for a while, but you have to be able to maintain the awake state for long enough to perceive the higher dimensions. What are higher dimensions, you may ask? It's hard to talk about. There are words for them. They in Arabic, they call them alam, which means worlds. And they are areas of perception. They're literally higher dimensions in the sense of, okay, basic geometry. You have a dot. That is no dimension. You have a line. That is 1 dimension. You have a plane. That is 2 dimensions. You have a cube. That is 3 dimensions. You have a tesseract. That's 4 dimensions.
It's the weird square thing that moves in all
And
kinds of
it's
crazy
interesting
ways.
because the crust of the Yasevi Tarika is built on a tesseract. The moment that I realized that, it literally was a jaw-dropping experience when, after years of working with it, I went, oh, that's a fourth dimensional hypercube expressed in 2 dimensions. Holy crap.
Which tarika was that? Asks Naomi.
And the Yaseviya.
I'll type it in the chat.
Yeah, type it in the chat. That's us.
Yes, by the way.
Suzanne, as always, it's a pleasure to have you. I hope that we will see you again soon. Or again, yes.
Yes. Take care. Thank you. And my relatives are here. You can say hi to them too.
Your relatives are here?
Yes. Behind John Wright.
Ah, cool.
So we're talking about dimensions, and we talked about, we'll have to, yeah, I mean, we've shown that shape before, but we can post it on
Next week, we're delving into that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, look
Delving
forward to
into-
seeing it then.
You are going to get a dimensional geometry lesson next week, and it'll actually be exciting. And you will understand some things. You'll understand why you do not operate in higher dimensions now, and why we, on this plane of existence, when we are under 48 laws, are not going to operate in higher dimensions, but we can perceive those higher dimensions. We can garner from them. And sometimes through grace, we can experience a little bit of that. If you want to know about experiencing higher dimensions, read the account of the night journey. Y'all know what the night journey was?
Not
Yes.
everyone is going to know what that is for sure.
Yeah. So the night journey is when the Prophet Muhammad was taken from Medina. I think it was Medina. Was it? Was it Medina or Mecca where he started the night journey? I can never.
Mecca.
Mecca. Okay. So taken from Mecca to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem to heaven, to paradise, to go through the stages of paradise, being led by the angel Gabriel, until he was allowed to experience the divine reality. And this, when we hear it, we should hear a story of the human soul moving through these higher dimensions. Because each one of those rings of heaven that he experienced was like a dimension. So that's one thing that we have. And of course, you can look at Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise, whatever, Dante's Infernal. And get some ideas. So the night journey is, I think, the most interesting of them for me.
James.
I'm assuming Ibn Arabi's journey to the Lord of Power is in the same territory.
Yes.
I've only briefly read it once, but a very superficial reading, but that's the impression I got.
Yeah, and the journey to the Lord of Power is about Khalwat Garanjuman. It's entirely about retreat.
Solitude in the crowd.
Yeah. By the way, there is a great Turkish TV show, Resurrection. What is it, Noor? Do you remember?
I never say it right. I'm embarrassed to say it.
I never say it right either, but give me a hint and I'll give it a try.
Arturo? I mean, no one knows what it is. Help, please.
Arturo.
Arturo. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And the cool thing about it is that it has Ibn Arabi all through the thing. You know, I mean, I watched a little clip today from that show, Ibn Arabi leading zikr in Al-Aqsa. It was like, yes. So you can find it on Netflix.
Just expect to spend like, you know, several days of your life getting through one season because it's so long.
It's long, and we love that though. I hate these eight episode seasons that we get here. But anyway, we digress. Back to higher dimensions. If I lived on a plane, I could experience a little bit of the effect of 3 dimensions in certain ways. I could notice the effect of 3 dimensions on the plane on which I lived, and I could get glimpses of how it switches. I couldn't go into 3 dimensions myself because it would alter me in such a way that I could never go back. Yeah, that's the one.
I was just putting the name of the TV show in the chat. But
yeah.
Anyways.
It's a fun show. They got good sword fights. Great archery.
Great CG blood.
Yeah. All the CG blood.
Yep.
And they tell, and the Templars are the bad guys.
Which is an interesting
I like that point of view myself.
All right, dimensions. Let's try to stay on topic.
Stay on dimensions. So, through certain practices, one can begin to get glimpses of what it's like when something flips through a higher dimension. And there's a bit of grace in that. And there's a way that we exercise our minds in order to begin to see it. This is going to be all of next week's talk is going to be, once you have gotten to the point where you can stay awake long enough, what do you do in order to begin to do this? And how do you begin to collect the energy of the higher dimensions? And what do we call these dimensions? We've talked about alam. We're going to go through the alam, and you are going to know what they are. And we're giving away great secrets here. The ancient white brotherhood is going to take a hit out on us for this. You don't care.
Yep. So y'all can take it or leave it if it sounds like woo-woo crazy talk, but really all we're talking about is the fact that every day we're walking around with blinders on due to the fact that we carry our presuppositions and biases and habituations through every moment of every day.
Yeah, everything that consistently allows us not to see what really is.
Yeah, and you know, I think we all know what that's like. And we're talking about stripping those away to see what is, as well as a human in all of their sensory experience and limitations and gifts, as well as a human can experience those things, seeing what is actually in front of us, experiencing what is actually around us.
So that's basically the end of part 1. So what do you do with this? Do you have a breath practice? If so, in this next week, put a little bit of extra energy into your breath practice. with the idea of you want to be awake. And as I like to point out, the easiest way to achieve that state of awakeness is just to ask yourself, am I awake or am I asleep? And look inside and check, because in that moment, you will be awake. How long you can hold that is a whole different thing. And you want to be able to extend the time that you can hold that awake state. And if you practice that this week, then next week we are going to take you to the next step, inshallah.
God willing.
So, any last questions, thoughts, queries,
Complaints?
answers?
Kvetches? Hi. Yes. All right. James,
The
yes. And
impression
Maria.
I've sort of,
I'll see you soon, Maria. James, go ahead.
what I've sort of come away with is the am I awake, attending to the breath. All this for me has very much been an experience of coming down out of the head and sinking down into the heart. And that's a quieter place, and a place where my emotional agenda and distortions and fantasies have less power. I would imagine that to have a realistic relationship with higher dimensions would kind of require that first, so that any experience you have doesn't get appropriated by the ego.
Yes.
That's just the assumption I'm starting to run on.
It works for me.
Okay, that's my only observation. It just seems to be the logic, the internal logic of it. And I just remember, conversely, going back to all the occultists I knew in my 20s, who were forever path working up into higher levels and coming back as the consecrated priest of Anubis or whatever. And their personal perspectives just seem to be unrealistic. Their perspective on themselves as the actual everyday living, breathing, talking person just seem to get worse and worse. It's delusional, not necessarily in the psychological sense, but just in I suppose so, but just a personal interactive sense. That unless you do this kind of this very basic, to my mind, basic waking up, am I awake, moderate the breath, moderating down, whatever, unless you've got some foundation in that, all the sort of like higher plane work is just kind of.
Well, also,
I'm
you don't
waffling.
go
Sorry.
to the higher planes. You can observe them a little bit, and you don't get a damn thing for it. There is no priesthood of Anubis. There is no Qatub al-Zaman. There is nothing waiting for you there.
Whole of the world, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like
of the world.
You're right. You use the word delusion, and it's kind of like the opening up of perceptions, as you said, can get co-opted by this part of us that wants everything to be, oh, I'm special now. I have special powers now. I have special perceptions. Look at what a pretty princess I am.
I want to be a pretty princess.
And yeah, I mean, there are words for that, like spiritual grandiosity is one. And that can become a big problem if we don't have this foundation of reality checking ourselves and being present in what is to the extent that we can best perceive it. And that's going to be something that develops over time. So we do have to be careful, right? Like, wow, am I just kind of fluffing things up because it sounds cool and I'm not really actually being with what is in front of me and what is actually inside of me?
Yeah.
We know how that can mess people up and create culty situations and issues where we're fooling ourselves. Yep.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maria. There
I
you
was just wondering about the role of love and devotion on the Enneagram, and not just to like the greater, Allah, but also to the teacher, the peer,
Um,
and what role that has to play in all of this. So I have a heart light practice, zikr practice, but I'm still struggling with that connection. And so I'm just curious about that, where that plays into this.
um,
Um,
is your teacher alive that you're trying to connect?
yes.
Okay, that helps. Um, the answer is it doesn't connect with this. That's a whole different thing.
Okay.
Love and devotion, the Enneagram of love is a different Enneagram. The Enneagram of devotion is a different Enneagram. And connection with the teacher is a different thing. And it is highly misunderstood because can I get myself in trouble a little bit, Nora?
Okay, I'll see if I need to like rein you
Okay,
in.
yeah. What passes for devotion and connection more often than not is manipulation and bullshit. I hate to say it, but this has been my experience, and I've been knocking around the Sufi world since I was 22 years old. And you got to watch out for that.
Oh, Brian got booted. I'm just letting him back in.
Just let him back in. So,
boarding in progress.
Yeah, so, you know, teachers who tend to manipulate students through their attachment to the teacher.
So real devotion to a teacher, real connection, what we call rabita, has nothing to do with attachment. It has to do with connection. It has to do with presence. It has to do with being able to touch the presence of the teacher and have the teacher touch the presence of you. It's the other thing. It has to go both ways. If you're trying to make rabita with a sheikh and that sheikh is not trying to make rabita back with you, it's not going to happen. Not really. Are you picking up what I'm putting down here?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So
thank you.
love is good. We're all for love, and we're all for devotion, but devotion is not to a human being. Devotion is to the divine reality. And it's not to the divine reality through a human being. It's to the divine reality through you. And to steal a line from Princess Bride, anybody who tells you anything different is trying to sell you something. Okay, so much for getting in trouble. And Ian has a question.
No, I was just going to say I may have some comments that could be useful in relation to this.
Please go ahead then.
I too have a teacher and a practice, which I've been doing for multiple decades, and I'm perfectly happy with them. And over the years, I have been also very interested in Uspensky Gurdjieff, and to a lesser extent Sufism, to the to a little bit I've learned about it. And it took me quite a long time, as in multiple years, to realize that I could disentangle the two. And one of the reasons that I was able to do that is that the systems are so, in some ways there are obvious adjacencies and similarities in certain respects, and in other ways they're very different. The practice I do is just very simple. There's no concept of levels, for example, whereas in a system like this, as with any sort of conventional practice in the world, and I don't want to sort of imply that this is like that, but to go to talk about Mushtaq's martial arts, there's obvious levels in martial arts, right? And when we talk about the Enneagram and development, then we're talking about levels. And so for me, one of the things that I make a point of trying to keep straight while I'm getting involved to a certain extent with this group is to try and maintain my clarity on those separations. I don't know if that really helps you, but I thought it might be helpful to present that perspective. And I've also, to come back to some of what Mushtaq said about love, devotion, and all of that, I absolutely agree with what he said about that, because I've seen it from kind of both sides. If there's manipulation, it's not good. But if it's really freely, I'm not sure that I can find the words for this, but I remember my teacher once talking about bhakti yoga.
Devotional yoga.
Yes. And this was many years ago, and I can't remember the details at this point, but it was so beautiful because it was there was no coercion. It was just a way of, there's something there when it's real. It's just absolutely beautiful.
I think those of us who have felt it know what that feels like, that connectedness. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing as a sense of clarification. And it's funny you mentioned martial arts, because the martial art that I study and train in doesn't have any ranks, doesn't have any levels. You're a student until you're finished being a student.
Ah, very interesting.
Yeah. And this is much like that. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, there are no levels of consciousness. You are either awake or you're asleep. Being a little bit awake is like being a little bit pregnant. You know, and that is our perspective. we don't look at levels, we look at process. What is the process that we go through? And I think we're a little bit different than what you've been describing because of that particular perspective.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, for example, from what I read about Ouspensky going back years, I think I picked up my copy of In Search of the Miraculous maybe a couple of years after you picked up yours.
We are the OGs.
Gurdjieff talked about the levels of man.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
a definite hierarchy going on there. And quite a few years ago, probably a couple of decades, I decided, for example, to stop even thinking about no picture, so you can't see my air quotes, being spiritual, because I had come to realize that that often just feeds ego. I'm more spiritual than you are, and it's just bullcrap.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's an internet guy who made a fortune on that exact subject.
Yeah.
The super spiritual guy.
Yeah, who ended up being kind of sketchy, but you know, he
Had
was
some good points.
satirizing some real phenomena around this idea of spiritual clout, I guess we could say. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're ahead of the curve on that one. But yeah, and you know, I will talk about the 7 levels of man according to Gurdjieff. The thing is, I understand that it's just metaphor. It's a model, and no model is real. Higher dimensions is a model. It's not real. The map is not the territory. It's just a map.
Yeah, I mean that should be an underlying thread in everything that we talk about, is that we are really struggling to talk about things that really are difficult to discuss verbally and to,
in some ways, impossible to discuss.
yeah, so you have to develop quote unquote maps to even remotely begin to describe the phenomena we're trying to share with people and to discuss and to investigate together.
Yeah.
Naomi.
Something that you said really got me curious. You said, you know, when it's the map, not the territory, it's not real. It seems to me that the territory itself is actually more real than the map.
Of course.
Yes.
But in order to have a map that is accurate to the territory, the map has to be as big as the territory.
Right.
This is the trouble with all maps. Leave stuff out. All maps use symbols to describe what's actually there. A good map is useful. A good map can get you from Mecca to Medina, right? A bad map will get you to New Jersey instead, and then nobody needs that.
It's cold. Yeah. Yeah, it's to use a big fancy word, a heuristic, a shorthand.
Yeah. And one of the things that when I am awake, I can experience being awake. I cannot describe to you being awake in any way that resembles the actual truth. Any description I have, any words I have are once removed, and therefore they are metaphor.
You're doomed to word salad.
Yes.
No matter what we do.
But if you're awake and I'm awake, we don't need the words. We understand without words. We know, because it's like you sit there and you look out through your eyes and you see yourself looking back through your eyes, through their eyes. And that's metaphor. See what happens? It all goes to hell.
Yeah.
So I have some other questions, kind of more generalized, just about you guys and the group, and I wouldn't want to like, put that in the recording
Okay,
if you'd rather keep it on
we're going
topic.
to end the recording, and there's a moment afterwards when we talk about things that nobody wants to hear. So let's do that. Let's
Yeah.
wrap it up before this gets too dang long. And let me switch over to Brady Bunch mode. There we go. All these smiling faces.
Yay.
Yeah. All right,
Thanks
folks.
to all of you who
Thank you for
stuck
being
around.
with us.
Yeah.
And give them hell out there. Remember to do your breath practice. And we'll see you next week.
Come back for next week, part 2.
Yeah,
Take care,
it'll be
everybody.
fun.
We can wave to each other, wave to everybody watching on YouTube.
Bye, folks.
Bye.